Well, let's look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Wednesday morning. A couple accidents to report. One at Atlas Road and Garner's Ferry. Another one at Emmanuel Church Road and Old Barnwell. Another one at Garner's Ferry near I-77. And last one at Leap Heart and Mineral Springs. Today a little bit warmer, high of 55 with clouds. Tomorrow, even warmer than that, high of 60 with clouds. Right now, currently 27 in downtown Columbia. And there's going to be some winter weather on its way this weekend that we'll talk about as the week goes along. That's your traffic and weather on your Wednesday here on the game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. It's our head and Jack Belcher along with you here. I'm going to keep messing up the day of the week because I keep thinking about it. I said Monday yesterday. It is Wednesday. We're halfway through the week, but I guarantee you I'm going to call it Tuesday again at some point before you get out of here, Jack.
Well, just make sure you don't make sure you don't have to repeat which day it is during the show. I mean, you got it out of the way, so I think most people know it's. I would hope everyone knows it's Wednesday, but I don't blame you if you think it's Tuesday because the days of the week are all screwed up because of the MLK weekend.
It is kind of like a nice treat though when you're in a week like this and maybe you wake up and you're like, oh man, it's only Tuesday, and then you're like, oh wait a minute, it's actually Wednesday because. Once you get to noon, you're officially halfway through the week, closer to another weekend. Now, it sounds like we're in for a lot of winter weather this weekend, so I would recommend preparing yourself before we get there. But a weekend nonetheless. Less football, only 2 games left, but still that much closer to it.
We are. It's they say the divisional round is the best weekend of the football season, which honestly, after the games we had, I can't really disagree. That and wild card weekend, but conference championship games this weekend, I'm really looking forward to it. Despite the Bills being eliminated, I probably won't watch as closely as I would otherwise. But I'll be definitely tuned in.
I think now with the way that the college football calendar is, I think wild card weekend is better because you get a semifinal game Thursday, semifinal game Friday. You get the 2 games on Saturday. 3 games on Sunday, and then 1 game on Monday. So you get 5 days of high-stakes, win-or-go-home football between college and pro. I think if assuming that stays the same, I think wild card weekend now is the better weekend overall.
Yeah, I just to some extent, I would say so. I mean, there were some really good games in both weekends, so it's hard to say one way or the other. I think you get better matchups in the divisional round, which is obvious because those are the teams that advance from the wild card round to the divisional, but there's more games and whatnot, so you could get better games in the wild card, but when you have the better matchups, I'd say it's probably going to be the divisional.
We'll talk plenty about those the conference championship matchups later on in the week. We'll get into the latest of NFL coaching hires as some jobs have already been filled this week a little bit later on in the show. But we got to start off with what happened last night over at Colonial Life Arena right after our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all 9s.
Oh, it is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt, in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Last night over at CLA, South Carolina men's basketball picks up their second win of conference play, 85-76 over the Oklahoma Sooners. This was a game that I think we all felt comfortable with South Carolina having the ability to win, and we're not going to be able to say this a whole lot for the rest of the year, but I was watching that game last night and watching how sloppy Oklahoma was. I'm like, oh yeah, Carolina's definitely the better team here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the odds makers were picking South Carolina to be favored in this game. But I think for the Gamecocks last night, just coming out very, no pun intended, very strong, with Elijah Strong going on an 11-0 run to open the game by himself. They were up 21-9 at one point. I believe it got up to 28-14 was their biggest lead. I know they had a 14-point lead at one point in the first half. Now, Oklahoma came back, cut it down to 3. The key for South Carolina in that second half was when you see this team kind of falter a little bit late in the first half. That's what happened in the Georgia game was Georgia cut the lead down. Second half, South Carolina goes back up, and then Georgia takes the lead for good and holds on. I was kind of thinking maybe the same thing would happen last night, but the good thing for South Carolina was that they've been missing at times this year. They shot pretty well overall, nearly 50% on the night, 45% from three-point range. They were a bit more selective with their three-point shots, I would say. 9 of 20 from deep. I would say that they weren't just shooting threes for the sake of shooting threes. Definitely taking a lot better looks, and that's what they're going to have to do moving forward. But a good win overall last night is they made shots when they needed to down the stretch.
Well, they took advantage of a team that struggles on defense like Oklahoma does, one that gave them opportunities inside the arc, and one that was going to let them get to the free throw line, because that's one thing that we talk about so much with the South Carolina team is they're good at shooting two-pointers, and they're good if you can get to the line. And last night, very efficient from the field overall at 49%. Like you said, very selective when it came to their three-point shooting, and then 22 of 28 from the free throw line, including making a lot of those down the stretch as Oklahoma was trying to narrow the gap with the fouls and everything like that. In fact, the 23-pointers is the fewest they've attempted, all season. Yeah, that's the fewest three-pointers, they've attempted this entire year. So, more selective with that. Made a lot of those, including Strong coming out of the gate. Polk had some good threes, throughout the game. And, we're able to just kind of manage that gap, really, in the second half because Oklahoma got better. They did start to make their buckets, but South Carolina never really let them go on any kind of crazy run in the second half to ultimately take the lead. They led wire to wire. Like once Strong got the first points of the game, Carolina never relinquished the lead, which again is one thing we have not really been able to say about them this year.
And I think the underrated factor in being able to hold that lead, because there were times where Oklahoma cut the deficit down the second half, and it could have potentially taken a miss here or there for things to change. I'll say the big difference, though, the free throw shooting. 22 of 28 last night, 78%. Meechie Johnson especially came through some big free throws when Oklahoma started to foul and tried to cut into the deficit. Because we've seen this team before have bad, for as solid of a free throw shooting team as they are, there have been games over the years under LP where they have had some big misses, and that's cost them in some games. I think back to Auburn last year. I think back to the Georgia late night game a few years ago where South Carolina was just abysmal free throw shooting. But Meechie Johnson last night, 13 of 15 at the line. Mike Sharver jumps 4 of 4. I mean, they really shot it well last night, and that's ultimately, it's not the difference. It could technically be the difference in the game, but when South Carolina needed to make some free throws, they were able to.
So, look, they're 2-4 in conference play. Still got a lot of challenging games ahead of them. What is the significance of this game at the end of the day? They've beaten the two teams in LSU and Oklahoma that you can make an argument that they're better than, but have obviously lost all their other conference games. Is this game hold significance to you?
In that they got back on track and won a game that they're supposed to, yes. I think it is significant from that standpoint. You're 2-4 in league play. You matched your SEC win total from last year, so that should tell you something right there, that this team has improved. And I think they've also responded quite well after what happened last week at Arkansas, right? They came up short in a game against Auburn that if they just shot a little bit better, they probably end up winning that game. And then, last night they shot overall really well, and you reap the benefits because of that. Now, I like to see this team go out there and do it against a better opponent. Not to say, look, Oklahoma's really struggling right now. They've lost 4 straight games, not playing particularly well. Can you go out there and do it on the road, say, against A&M this weekend? Then next week, you're home against Florida and LSU. Like, you got to start stacking some of these games. This is what I'm trying to get. You can't just be winning one game, then go on a 3-game losing streak, because then you're going to get to a point where if that's the trend you go on the rest of the year, you're only going to win 4, 5, 6 SEC games, and then you will not make the NCAA tournament that way, which I don't even know if that's on the table right now, but you really got to make some big strides here, and hopefully this win can kind of get you into some better standing moving forward.
Yeah, look, I don't think this is a tournament team based on what I've seen so far, but in terms of keeping that hope alive, I do think these next 3 games to close out the month of January are vitally important, and you took care of business last night. You got to win, got yourself back to 2-4 in conference play. Again, you've got A&M on the road this weekend, which is going to be tricky, but then you've got Florida and LSU at home to close out the month. Again, you've already beaten LSU once, feel pretty good about their chances of beating them at home on the 31st. So it's like, okay, can you find a way between Texas and Florida to win one of those games? Which, again, those are 2 really good teams that I think are just on paper and in other ways a lot better than South Carolina. But we know sometimes you have those nights where you find a way, the 3 balls falling, you're getting a line, making your free throws, and you can beat any team on any given night. If you can find a way to beat Florida or A&M and pick up the LSU win, then I think we're talking about this team still having some kind of relevance by the time we get to the month of February. And if you go out there and lose those next 2 games and just beat LSU, I think you're kind of cooked at that point. But finding a way to win 2 out of your next 3 can instill just a sliver of hope that maybe you can salvage something out of this season.
And that'd put you at 4-5 halfway through the league slate, because, again, it's 18 games, and you're currently 6 games in right now. You're looking better than you had than they did last year. I will definitely unequivocally say that. Aside from the Arkansas game, like, they lost by 5 to Georgia. They beat LSU. They lost by 12 to Vanderbilt. They lost by 4 to Auburn. They beat Oklahoma. Like, take out what happened in the Arkansas game, because even Lamont Paris was talking last night about hopefully that game is just an anomaly and that's not going to happen again this year. You're just hoping it's one of those nights where Arkansas was shooting 60% and South Carolina really didn't show much fight in the second half. You're hoping that is not going to be the case the rest of the way. But look, the SEC is not as good as it was last year, obviously, but does that mean South Carolina can take advantage and somehow, like, by the end of the year, Tyler, I think you want to try to get to about 500 in league play. I don't think that's going to do much for you in terms of your tournament hopes, but then again, that seems to be the bar that got a lot of teams in last year at worst. But if South Carolina didn't, they didn't win the games they needed to in non-conference play against good teams, that probably could have helped their resume a lot more and made it easier. So you're going to have to really do well in SEC play to get back to where you want to be. But nonetheless, last night's a good win. Hopefully that can really do something for momentum's sake moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know how important this win's going to be in the grand scheme of things when the season's over, but unfortunately we learned the lesson the hard way that last year beating power opponents across men's sports became a very rare thing. So I'll try and enjoy these as much as we can for the ones that we get. How about that?
Yeah, it's who knows how many they're going to have the rest of the year. Ken Pom projects them to go 15-16 and 6-12 in league play, and obviously that would not be enough to get them anywhere near where they want to be. But last night did show what they're capable of. If they play like that any given game, they're always going to have a chance. I think defensively they were even pretty decent last night. I know they were just giving us some shots there at the end to Oklahoma and not fouling them, but you're really hoping this is the start of something, because you have played better these last 2 games. Now can you take it on the road and beat an A&M team with a new coach? They're pretty good, it seems. We'll see.
South Carolina back in action coming up on Saturdays. They take on Texas A&M. Quick note from around the league. Remember Vanderbilt being the hottest story in college basketball a couple weeks ago when they were undefeated? 3 straight losses, losing on the road by 25 points last night to Arkansas, as they are coming back down to earth pretty fast up there in Nashville.
Yeah, it's not looking good for them.
It's definitely not. Again, men's basketball back in action coming up on Saturday, taking on Texas A&M. Lamont Paris tomorrow night on Carolina Calls at 7 o'clock right here on 107.5 The Game. We're continuing to unpack the fallout of Indiana winning the national championship. What message of hope does Curt Cignetti give to other programs hoping they can be the next Indiana? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you on your Wednesday on The Game.
If you're a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or finding them online at callAAAtoday.com. Tell them Jack Veltri from 107.5 The Game sent you over. At AAA Heating and Air, they've got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check required. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you'll be good to go. Take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA Heating and Air is 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Of course, now 2 days removed from Indiana pulling off one of the most improbable stories we've seen in college football, maybe in sports in a very, very long time, but winning the national championship and going 16-0 in Curt Cignetti's second year at the helm there for Hoosier football. So what message of hope does this send to other programs around the country, hoping they can be the next Indiana? Coach Cignetti was asked about that after the game on Monday.
I think we sent a message, first of all, to society that if you keep your nose at the grindstone and work hard and you got the right people, anything's possible. In our particular situation in the athletic world, college football's changed quite a bit, the balance of power also. But we had the right people on our staff, in the weight room, in the locker room. And we had great senior leadership and togetherness, and we had a really good quarterback that played his best when the chips were down. And if you prepare the right way, which this team did week in, week out, and put it on the field, we met the challenge every single week, and we're 16-0. Are there 8 first-round draft choices on this team? Probably not. No, there aren't. But this team, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts.
I think that last point's really important there that Cignetti talked about, because I think there's a misconception out there that Indiana just was the top spinner in the transfer portal, that Indiana just got all the best talent to compile this roster. That's not really true. Yes, Fernando Mendoza was a really good quarterback at Cal last year and probably commanded a high amount of NIL dollars to come to Indiana, but you look around him, and this team is not loaded with what we would perceive to be superstars of college football, but they're experienced. A team that's played a lot of college football over the years, whether the guys that came from James Madison or holdovers from, when Tom Allen was head coach at Indiana, that all just created this perfect storm of a team that nobody could beat.
That's right. I mean, they did not have any 5 stars on this team, which is, it's kind of crazy to think about that being the case in this day and age where, look, stars aren't the end-all, be-all, but most teams that are really good end up having a lot of them, like the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias. But a team like Indiana, yeah, I mean, they don't have that pedigree of winning, number one, and have only been really good now for the last 2 years since Cignetti took over. But I think what this goes to show is that you don't need all the top end talent based on star ratings in the world. You just need good, experienced players that can work together for one collective goal, and that's exactly what we saw with this Indiana team. All the pieces just fit in perfectly together. I mean, Fernando Mendoza was a 2-star recruit coming out of high school that couldn't even get on Miami, his hometown school back in the day. So he ended up going to Cal, and then he comes to Indiana for 1 year and wins the Heisman Trophy. So I just think it was the perfect storm of the players from the previous, under Tom Allen and what Cignetti had come with them from James Madison and hitting on the right guys in the transfer portal. It worked out really well. We've seen what success looks like when you hit on those guys in the portal. For instance, at South Carolina, 2024, they hit on so many different guys in the portal, won 9 games, made it to the Citrus Bowl, which is considered to be the top-end bowl game if you're not in the college football playoff. And then we saw what happened this year when South Carolina didn't hit on the portal guys at the same rate. And then you see a team like Indiana doing what they do, and it's not just the portal, but it's also just having Cignetti doing his job as the head coach. He's done a remarkable job there, and he's right. He wins where he goes, and Google him.
It has to be a balance, right? And I've seen a lot of people make comparisons in the last couple of days that, like, Indiana is what Colorado was supposed to be under Deion Sanders, right? Because Deion comes in, a lot of hoopla, a lot of attention, rightfully so, because of who he is, and attracted a lot of money to Colorado, right? And Colorado's not the biggest spender, but they're certainly able to spend more now than they would have if they'd hired anybody else besides Deion, right? He brought attention to the program, which brings in money and all that kind of stuff. But as we've seen, just because you have the money doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Kurt Cignetti is a far better head coach than Deion Sanders is. So Cignetti's got a good amount of money in NIL, being helped out by the likes of Mark Cuban and all that kind of stuff. But he's also just a really good coach that has ascended the ranks. This guy was at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania a handful of years ago. He was at Elon. He was at James Madison before getting a Power 4 job. And I'm not saying you have to climb the ladder that way to be a successful head coach. We've seen plenty of people that have gone from being just coordinators to being head coaches and won national championships, like Kirby Smart, like Dabo Sweeney, the only two other, and Ryan Day, the only three other active head coaches with national championships. But I think Kurt Cignetti is the coach he is because of those experiences he had coaching at these lower levels before getting the Indiana job.
Yeah, I mean, he is a great coach, obviously. The fact that he has done this, it's one thing to do it at the other schools and win there at Elon and JMU, but it's another thing to take a program that was so far down the dumps. It was only a few years ago. I saw a clip the other day. Back in like 2021, I want to say it was, Indiana came out with their white jerseys, except the Indiana lettering was spelled wrong.
I remember that.
So, I mean, that's where Indiana football was a few years ago. And keep in mind, they did have a good year when Michael Penix was their quarterback under Tom Allen. I believe that was the 2020 season.
2020, DeBoer was the OC.
Yes. So, Indiana has had success before, but it's not what it is now, right?
Right.
And it's not going to be this, they could honestly go on to have some real consistent success here now the real challenge is how do you replace what you lose is the big question. I think the biggest question is at the quarterback position. Can Josh Hoover, the transfer quarterback from TCU, be anywhere near as productive as Fernando Mendoza was? Based on what he's done at TCU, you would definitely say so, but we'll see if the Big 12 numbers can translate over to the Big 10. But Cignetti's done a great job, and I would have full confidence that this is not – I mean, I thought last year might have been a fluke, but I think after 2 years and winning a national championship, I believe this can be a team that is right up there with the elites in college football.
Well, and again, we've only seen him in 2 years, but I believe Kurt Cignetti solidly cemented himself as one of the best coaches in college football right there in the mix when we talk about the Ryan Days, the Kirby Smarts, the Dabo Sweeneys that have all other else won national championships. And I think this upcoming season in 2026 is the, establishing that you're not going anywhere type of year, right? Because, they'd certainly benefited from having a lighter schedule in 2024 and, got beat when they played better teams like Ohio State and Notre Dame, went out in the offseason, got better, got more experience, upgraded, went on to win the national championship. Now that you're losing a lot of that talent, it's like, okay, how do you respond? Do you go out there and replace those guys and get yourself back to the playoff? Maybe you don't win the national championship necessarily, but you still establish yourself as one of the best programs in college football. I think that's going to be the thing that people are waiting to see before having the conversation of is Kurt Cignetti now the best coach in college football? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely not the best coach in college football, but is he the? I don't know how to put it honestly. I wouldn't say he's the best coach in college football right now. I think he's right up there with the other ones. I think he's right up there with Ryan Day for sure. I still think a guy like Kirby Smart is just the best in college football just because of the consistency he's built at Georgia and what he's done there. But make no mistake, Kurt Cignetti is quickly coming for that title if he's able to, let's say, not only get back to the playoff next year for a third straight year, but also potentially win the national championship again. Indiana's going to have a chance to do it. I think they're going to have to find a way to recapture that magic just like they did this year.
So what does Kurt Cignetti and Indiana winning the national championship mean for Coach Beamer in South Carolina? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. It's our and Jack Veltri on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour. Head Jack Belcher with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Before we get into what Indiana winning the national championship means for South Carolina, I think it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of years if Indiana continues to win at a high level, continues to be in the playoff, competing for the Big Ten and the national championship, watching their fan base evolve, right? Because right now, Indiana fans are still very much in like, oh my God, I can't believe we're here. This is amazing. We're taking it in every moment. And, you know, they didn't care if they won the national championship by 1 point or 50 points. They just wanted to win the thing. If they continue to win, watching them mold into like that Alabama type of fan, you know, at the peak of the dynasty, we're like, well, what do you mean we only beat Arkansas by 24 points? That's unacceptable. Like, does Indiana ever get there, like with this fan base that continue to win at a high level?
I think you do. We see, look, Alabama's a good example. Alabama has all the history, even before Nick Saban became the head coach and did all the winning that he did in his long tenure there in Tuscaloosa. But we see it now with Kalen DeBoer being the head coach. Winning 10 games is not acceptable, and getting your butt kicked in the Rose Bowl by this very Indiana team is certainly not okay. And there's a different standard for winning. So I could see it kind of getting to that level with Indiana and Signetti maybe within the next few years. If this really does continue for another 2, 3, 4 years and Indiana's winning multiple national championships, then, yeah, I think Indiana fans are going to come to expect this type of dominance year in and year out, but that's not realistic for every single year moving forward, just because there are going to be losses here and there, and they're going to be down years. But for Indiana, they're definitely on that trajectory of becoming one of the better teams in college football for sure.
I look forward to a message board post when Indiana's down by like 7 points to Purdue at halftime in like a year or two, saying, "Oh my God, what's wrong? Everything's falling apart. Fire everybody." Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be an interesting evolution to watch as time goes by. Again, going back to Kurt Signetti's message a minute ago, this instills hope in a lot of fan bases. Like, hey, we can be the next Indiana. They can do it. We can do it. So, question now is, how much does what Indiana did on Monday night put pressure on somebody like Coach Beamer in South Carolina? Because Indiana just passed you by, right? Carolina had a way more historical success in football, which in the grand scheme of things compared to everybody else in the college football isn't a ton. But in the past 25 years or so, things have obviously gotten better. But you were leaps and bounds farther ahead than Indiana, and they just came and ran right by you with the coach, with the NIL money that they have, and they went to the mountaintop. So I think a coach like Beamer and a program like South Carolina, and you see it from the fans on social media, on y'all's message boards, like, hey, why can't that be us? So we already knew Beamer had a lot of pressure put on him going into this year, where we all feel like he's effectively coaching for his job. I think what Indiana did this year only adds more pressure to a program like Carolina and Coach Beamer.
I think it's not even just for South Carolina. This is literally for any program. Like, if Indiana can go from being nothing to something in the span of 2 years, then any team in college football can. Like, Indiana is not historically a football school at all. The success does not come from football. It's basketball. That is what Indiana is for sure. Now, the fact that Indiana was able to do it so quickly is another thing, where you would imagine, like if Indiana can do it, South Carolina, these other programs can do it. And I think it just also tells us that, like, this year is a make or break year for South Carolina. Like, I don't think 6 wins or even just barely making a bowl game is acceptable anymore. Like, you got to be able to hit on your transfer portal guys. I think that's the big key here for South Carolina, with so many new players coming in. You must be able to get some production out of those guys. Otherwise, it's going to be another 4-8 type of season like it was in 25. And the thing for South Carolina was, I don't even think they – when we hear Beamer kind of talk about how South Carolina wasn't far off, you probably scoff at it, and I know the fans definitely don't like to hear that sort of thing, but I don't think it's that crazy to think when you were really in a lot of these games. You should have been able to beat Texas A&M. You had, a one-score deficit against teams like Ole Miss and trying to think of the other games here. Ole Miss and Clemson and LSU. You were right in the middle of all these games, and if they just go a different way, we're talking about South Carolina being right back where they were in 24. So you got to be able to get this thing turned around. There's no excuse. If Indiana can do it, so should South Carolina, especially with the NIL resources they put into seemingly this team that they got going here for 26. They should be able to be a lot better moving forward. And I'm not saying they need to win the national championship in 26, but, man, we heard Shane talk about the playoff expectations and how they'll be right in the playoff mix when the initial rankings are revealed. That needs to be the case in 26. I don't care how tough the schedule is. Newsflash, South Carolina plays a tough schedule every single year. It should be manageable for this team to be able to get to that point, considering what they have coming back as well as what's coming in.
Coach Beamer on, I guess it was the second week of the college football playoff rankings, on that Tuesday when he talked to you all, said, hey, this time next year, we're going to be a team that's going to be involved in these rankings. We're going to be waiting to see where they put us in the top 25. Okay, and then after the Clemson game, he said, hey, this is the anomaly. Last year, both these teams were fighting for playoff spots. It's going to be the case again next year. Okay, well, you're putting more pressure on yourself, but we'll see what happens. It's one of those, remind me when we get here a year from now, and I hope he's right. And if he is right, then we continue to talk about their Beamer era here at South Carolina. If not, again, depending on what the rest of the season looks like, we'll have to see. But, he knows the pressure. He understands it. And, again, I think a program like Indiana having their success only mounts that pressure, not only for him, but other coaches around the country even more. And I think it's going to be interesting as there were so many hirings made this past offseason. Lane Kiffin obviously going to LSU, James Franklin getting canned, them hiring Matt Campbell. We have all the other hirings in the SEC with John Summerall and Alex Golish and Will Stein and all these coaches that are coming in to their first years of these new programs on the heels of what Indiana did, to where everybody in those fan bases is going to say, all right, are you the next Kurt Cignetti? Are you going to get us to the mountaintop like Indiana did? And I think we're already in an era in college football coaching where we're very impatient, where guys aren't even getting sometimes 2 full years, let alone 3, to really see what they have. I think we're shortening that window even more, because if you're not seeing the immediate return on investment like Indiana got with Cignetti, I do think there are going to be places they're going to pull the trigger even faster now because of that.
Maybe it's unfair pressure, but look, when you're putting it, it's one thing if this were 7-8 years ago and you're hoping to win right away, but there's money on the line now. You're putting so much NIL and money into these programs that, yes, you better get some return on investment right away. And I think it's a blessing and a curse that Indiana has done what they've done, because it tells programs that they need to, number one, pony up. And it's not like Indiana's also had I don't know exactly what they've had, but I've read that it's not on the same level as the Ohio States of the world and these other big programs. Again, Indiana did not have a single 5-star on their team. Otherwise, I think with more money, they probably would have some of those 5 stars that we're talking about here. But I think for these programs that don't necessarily have the greatest track record of winning, and they see what Indiana's doing, it just puts more pressure on them to go out there and be that program. Now, is it realistic for every program to do what Indiana's done? No, probably not. It takes more time for other programs, but you're entering your 6th year now with Shane Beamer as your head coach, and you've had some good seasons and some real bad seasons. There can't be any gray area this season. It's either got to be really, really good, or if it's bad, it'll be bad. And you're hoping it's really good, because this South Carolina needs to have a real good season after what happened in 25.
Well, and they've done a lot of good things so far when it comes to hiring, when it comes to the transfer portal, that could be a reason why they've slid inside some people's way to early top 25s, which we'll get to coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. But up next, a couple of legendary names have found their way into the Baseball Hall of Fame. We'll discuss who those guys are. Coming up next, wrap up hour number 1. It is the Extra Points. Our head and Jack Veltri with you on your Wednesday here on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. Our head Jack Veltri wrapping up hour number 1 here on your Wednesday. We're a little over a month away from college baseball getting started as South Carolina opens up the season on February 13th, taking on Northern Kentucky, but we do have some baseball news on the professional level as the National Baseball Hall of Fame has announced a couple more members that will be joining the alumni of the Hall of Fame coming up later on this summer, that being Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones, two legendary outfielders in their own right. Of course, I associate Beltran more of his time with the Yankees, not with the Yankees, with the Mets.
I was about to say.
Yeah, and Andrew Jones, of course, longtime Atlanta Brave. Funny enough, both these guys did end up being Yankees later on in their career because it seems like everybody at least spends a couple years with the Yankees towards the end of their career at least.
Yeah, I think Beltran will definitely go in as a New York Met. He was there from 2005 to 2011 when he got traded to the Giants, but I would definitely associate him as a Met, and Andrew Jones obviously is going to go in as a Brave. He was there from 96 to 2007 before bouncing around and ending his career with the Yankees. But both guys deserve to be in. I am surprised it's taken this long for Andrew Jones to get in. He received 78.4% of the votes in his 9th year on the ballot, Tyler. We're talking about a guy that has hit over 400 home runs, 5-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glover, and he's got a Silver Slugger. So that's a little surprising how long it took for him to get in, and because you need 75% of the vote to get in.
Right.
So
you got 10 years to
10
be on
years.
the ballot, so he would have only had one more year to get that opportunity.
But he ends up getting in 9th year, long overdue, and then Beltran, 84% of the vote in his 4th year on the ballot. So both guys make sense that they are in for sure.
Yeah, I think with Andrew Jones, because so much of what made him great was his defensive ability, I don't think we look at outfielders for their defense as much as we do for their batting statistics, which are both obviously important when it comes to getting the Hall of Fame. I think we focus more on infielders when it comes to defense. So, yeah, Golden Gloves are awesome, but I don't think that moves the needle as much when it comes to outfielders compared to what your batting statistics are.
True, and we also have to think about the era that he was in. He was playing around the same time as guys like Ken Griffey, and that makes it tough for sure because he gets a little overshadowed, I would imagine. But definitely a pivotal part of why the Braves were so good. First off, during those years from the 90s all the way until the 2000s when they had all those years of winning the NL East consecutively. What was it, like 14 years in a row?
Yeah.
So
yeah. That was and obviously the Braves have had plenty of success, especially in recent years winning the World Series back in 2021. But like the era of the Braves I'm most nostalgic for is the mid-2000s when you had Chipper, when you had Andrew, Francoeur, McCann, those guys coming up. Those are like my most enjoyable times because you're a kid, you know what I mean? You're learning the sport, watching it with your dad or whatever. Like those are my fondest memories. Getting to see Andrew Jones play in person a few times when he was with Atlanta. Like he's got to be, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, it's like top 3 of greatest athletes maybe I've ever seen play in person, if not top 5. It was neat. It was neat growing up watching him as an Atlanta Brave.
yeah, he was. I got to watch these guys at the tail end of their careers. I mean, Andrew was with the Yankees from 2011 to 12, and then Beltran was with the Yankees for 3 years. Made an all-star team in 2016 before leaving for the Rangers and then rounding out his career with Houston. But, yeah, I mean, both really deserving players. And you look at the rest of the ballot, I'm a little surprised. Chase Utley received nearly 60% of the vote in his 3rd year on the ballot. So he's only 15% away from making it to Cooperstown. Andy Pettit received 48.5% of the vote. He's got 2 years left on the ballot. Felix Hernandez made a huge jump on the ballot. I believe a 20% jump, if I'm not mistaken, up to 46% in his 2nd year on the ballot. And then Manny Ramirez is off the ballot now after 10 years and only receiving 38% of the vote.
And you can still, like Jeff Kent got in on the veterans thing, so you can still get in later after the fact.
Yeah, I think Manny will be eligible for that in, I believe it's 28, so a few years from now. I think we're going to, so next year Buster Posey will be on the ballot, so he's going to be the one shoo-in, I would imagine, to make it right away. I would assume he gets in first ballot. For a catcher with 3 World Series rings and MVP, Rookie of the Year, I would assume he gets in. I wonder if Utley gets in next year, because you look at his numbers, a little bit under 2,000 hits, 259 homers, 275 batting average, 6-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger, 2008 World Series champ. I wonder if he gets in next year. I don't know. I think at second base especially, I think he's got a really good chance now that he's made such a big leap with 7 years left to go on the ballot, but we'll see.
Again, Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones, the latest additions to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. That introduction coming up a little bit later on in the summer as we get that much closer to baseball season. I know when you look outside, it doesn't feel that way, but we're almost there. Of course, college baseball starting in a month. By the way, we'll actually have Monty Lee on the halftime show today with myself and Bill Gunner coming up right at the start of the show at noon. They got, I think, batting practice not long after that, so he was able to squeeze us in at the start of the show. So we'll talk to him and get some insight on Gamecock baseball as we inch closer to the start of the season. Where does South Carolina fall in way too early top 25s, and what does it mean for the Gamecocks? We'll discuss that coming up next in hour number 2, the Extra Point, here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri with you. Hour number 2 here on your Wednesday on the game. We'll get into some way too early top 25s and where South Carolina falls coming up in just a moment. But piggybacking off of our conversation about the National Baseball Hall of Fame, inducting Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones coming up later on this year. Ray wants to weigh in on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Ray, appreciate the call as always. What's on your mind, man?
Hey, good morning, Tyler. Good morning, Jack. Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. I'm glad they're rewarding Andrew Jones. I know there's people looking at, hey, he's a 250 hitter. You know, I know he hit 425 home runs or something like that. But I think that was part of it. But I think a bigger part of it was his prowess as a defensive outfielder. I mean, I have heard people tell me, Tyler, that maybe other than Willie Mays, he's one of the greatest defensive outfielders of all time. So I think that if people just look at just the batting average alone and say, how did he get in, I think you got to look at that same way we did with Ozzie Smith. You know, Ozzie could get a clutch hit, but man, what he did on that infield was just phenomenal. So I applaud the writers for putting Andrew Jones in. But man, I've got to piggyback is the right word here, Tyler. I got to go back to my era. Okay, Dale Murphy in the 1980s. I'm just talking about like if you look at his numbers from 1980 to 1989, he was. Other than Mike Smith was number one. But Murphy was so close to Mike Smith in so many numbers. Maybe not batting average, but Murph's batting average during the 80s was 275. He had 308 home runs. Smith had 313. But nobody else was close to those two guys. And Murph's numbers were so good. But baseball, they're looking at his full career. And, you know, he had a few years in the 70s there when he was getting going. And then in the early 90s, he had all those injuries and he couldn't quite maintain and he kind of lost a lot. But I think for what he did in the 1980s, and that was a phenomenal year of baseball players, if you look back on it, I think Murphy deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. It may never happen, but I'm kind of like Jay Phillips on that one. And me, they don't agree on a lot of things, but this one I absolutely agree with you.
I'll
just want to put that up.
Yeah. I'll chime in on that real quick. Good point bringing up with Murphy. I'm surprised he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. 2-time MVP, 7-time All-Star, 5-time Gold Glover. He's a 4-time Silver Slugger. He even has a Clemente Award, which is pretty good. And you're right. I think the late 70s when he's just getting going. I mean, he only had 2 years in the 70s where really didn't do much. Then 78 on really played well. And then you get to the 90s and, yeah, didn't really have the same amount of success. But we're talking about his mid-30s at that point. So I don't know. I mean, that string of success from 82 to 87 is just insane, and I'd be hard-pressed to not put him in the Hall of Fame. I think if you get him in, or honestly, vice versa, like for me, a guy like Don Mattingly deserves to be in, quite honestly. And if one of those guys gets in, I think the other should undoubtedly be in my opinion. Those are guys that I think a lot of guys from the 80s that we're waiting to see if they'll ever get in. We'll see if the Veterans Committee can eventually get Murph in. But I think you speak for a lot of Braves fans there that he probably needs to be in for sure.
I don't know if it's the same conversation from a national baseball standpoint, but you can't bring up the Hall of Fame to most Brave fans and get too many sentences into that conversation without Dale Murphy being brought up at some point. In fact, I just, in pulling up his stats here, just Googling his name and clicking on news, within the past year, there's like 10 articles about Dale Murphy. He should be in the Hall of Fame and all this kind of stuff. So it's something that I think until it happens will just continue to be debated and lobbied for, quite frankly, by Braves fans, because you don't want that conversation to die. And obviously, you and I are from a generation that never got to see him play, but because he gets talked about so much, it keeps that it keeps the legend alive. And I know he's still living with us and all that kind of stuff, but like every Braves fan knows about Dale Murphy because that conversation has been ongoing for so long.
Like, my question is, would it be a different discussion and story if he had hit 400 home runs? Because you look at his stats, he's at 398, and typically the rule of thumb is if you hit about 500 home runs, you're usually in the Hall of Fame. Now, for a guy like Murph, 398, over 2,100 career hits. So I think you look at the numbers he's got in 815 OPS. You want to look at WAR. He's got a 46.5 WAR. I mean, I think he's definitely done enough to get in. I just wonder if it would make any difference if he was a guy that hit over 400 home runs, because when you look at it, it's like, oh, well, he narrowly just missed it. But I think he's got the accolades, man. The resume is really good. There are guys in the Hall of Fame, like a Harold Baines, for example, made into the Hall of Fame a few years ago. And if a guy like that can get in, no disrespect to Harold Baines, but if a guy like that can get, I just find it crazy that Dale's still not in the Hall of Fame to this point. And I think many out there can probably agree with it.
Yeah, and I think the most insane thing is how little of the vote he's gotten when he was originally on the ballot. I believe here he only got the highest share was 28.2%. So nowhere even in the stratosphere where you need to be at that 75% to get in. If you're closer, if you're floating around 70%, you don't get in. Then you say, okay, well, at least you're close. But it didn't seem like they were ever close to putting him in, which I think is what rubs a lot of Braves fans the wrong way.
Yeah, and with the contemporary baseball era committee, I thought it was the Veterans Committee, but so you need 12 votes for induction, which is how Jeff Kent got in.
Right.
He only received 6, which is 37.5% of the vote, like we said there. So he's going to have a chance in future years. I just look at the numbers, and it's like, how is he not in the Hall of Fame, especially when you put a guy like Jeff Kent in? I don't know. I think he definitely should be in. It's crazy. All the Atlanta Braves that are in the Hall of Fame, and this guy's not one of them. That's just kind of puzzling to me.
Yeah, and again, people will continue to beat that drum with him as long as they possibly can. I think there's optimism that now you have this contemporary vote where you can get in after the fact, because he was on the original ballot when he could be on it for 15 years instead of 10, and obviously never came close. So fingers crossed that maybe in the next couple of years he can finally get in, and there may be a parade in Atlanta when if that finally does happen. For how long? My entire life I've been hearing about Dale Murphy deserving to be in the Hall of Fame, and obviously it still hasn't happened yet. I'm 30 years old.
Man, we need like Jay Phillips in here, David Cloninger. I mean,
I imagine yesterday Jay probably spent a good deal of time after talking about Andrew Jones and giving his flowers, talking about Dale Murphy to some degree.
Oh yeah, I mean even DC and I were talking about Murph last night. It's just like, how is he? It's just crazy he's not in the Hall of Fame at this point. It's just the numbers and all the accolades. It's like, what more?
You bring up a good point though.
Yeah.
That 400 mark for home runs is very much the difference of how you're viewed. Having more or less than 400 home runs is very much a real thing. Like, it's crazy. Again, he was only 2 home runs away from it, but like that is definitely like a line in the sand of how people view your career in terms of being over or under that number.
And he's got over 2,000 career hits. Like, if we're going, let me just put it this way. I brought up Chase Utley in the last segment, a guy that has, keep in mind, lesser numbers and lesser accolades than a guy like Dale Murphy. He got 59% of the vote in his 3rd year on the ballot, so he's got 7 years to go. I honestly think he's going. I don't think Chase Utley, he should be in the Hall of Very Good, not in the Hall of Fame.
The Hall of Very Good.
Like, have you seen that on on social media about the Hall of Very Good? Like, I think Jackie Bradley got in recently. My thing is, if a guy like Chase Utley is going to get into the Hall of Fame, then why is Dale Murphy not in? Maybe that's not the greatest comparison, but the numbers for Murph are so much better than what Utley had. And they're playing in different times, too.
Yeah.
Like, Murph played in the 80s, and Utley primarily played in the 2000s and early 2010s. So maybe it's different in that way, but the numbers are far better for Murphy than they are for Utley.
Yeah, the different eras that you play in certainly have a factor on it. Also, you have to think about who's voting, right? So I got to see when the last year that Murphy would have been on the ballot during his original 15-year run, but there's different baseball writers now than there were then. Yeah, there are some guys that have been legacies that have been around forever, but you also have a newer crop of younger writers now that didn't grow up watching Dale Murphy play, that did grow up watching the Chase Utleys and guys like that are going to be more in line to want to vote for somebody like that because they've seen them with their own eyes. There's a lot of people that are voting on players they never, quite frankly, got to see, and I think that does have an effect as well.
And just for reference here, with the normal, the normal Hall of Fame voting for the 10 years is the BBWA, which is the Baseball Writers Association of America. So you have the writers voting for you to get in.
Right.
With the Contemporary Baseball Era Committee, it's a smaller group of historians and Hall of Famers selected by the Hall itself to evaluate the candidates. So it's a different group of people. And so if it were writers, I mean, again, the writers didn't put in Dale on the initial run of ballots that he was on. So he got 6 votes. Maybe it's, I mean, I don't know. I think he's, depending on how many years he's got left, if this is, I don't know how many years he's been on the contemporary ballot, but if it's been a few years and he's halfway there and he's got maybe like 3 or 4 years left, I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head, then I feel like he's got an outside chance. But I think it's going to set a precedent that if a guy like Utley gets in with lesser numbers and Jeff Kent gets in, then I feel like you got to get a guy like Murphy in, who was honestly just as good as those guys for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, going back to the main point of what we're talking about, the Hall of Fame, Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran getting in, and those inductions will come a little bit later on in the summer, and we'll, as most Braves fans continue to beat the drum for maybe one day Dale Murphy finally getting himself into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Up next, we'll get into the way too early top 25. Kind of got on a little bit of a tangent there. We'll take a look at where South Carolina falls in some early top 25 rankings and what that means for them coming up this year in terms of expectations. That's up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We're not even 48 hours removed from the national championship going final. We're already looking ahead to 2026 with some way too early top 25s, and just about every national pundit out there has probably put out something to this degree so far. But I do think it's interesting. There have been a few that have involved South Carolina. Just a few examples. Brandon Marcello in his way too early top 25 had Carolina at number 25. Nick Bromberg of Yahoo Sports had him at number 22. Brad Crawford, also of CBS, had South Carolina at number 24. And look, this is just conversation point right now, and where you're ranked specifically doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter where you're ranked in the preseason poll either. Once we get into August, as I've said many times, only what happens when you get into the college football playoff top 25. They come out in November. But I do think it's interesting that for as bad of a season as Carolina had, for as much as they underachieved when they were in, the top, were they 13th when the season began last year?
Yes, and they got as high as 10.
Yeah, so they were projected to be a playoff team when the season started, and they horribly undershot those expectations this past year, and yet they're showing up in top 25s. Again, and no top 25 is more important than any other at this point right now, but I do think it's interesting that several of these national pundits think Carolina is worthy of being in there. Why is that?
It's a good question, honestly. And you saw Yahoo Sports had South Carolina at 22. CBS Sports, Brandon Marcello had South Carolina at number 25. I think it has a lot to do with what they have returning, right? I think it's Lenore Sellers coming back, Dylan Stewart, Nick Harbor. In this day and age of college football where you have players transferring right and left, it's hard to bring your core group of players back for another season when there's tampering going on and teams are trying to poach players from other schools. It's tough to do that. And then you couple that with what South Carolina's brought in through the transfer portal, where they've actually brought in really good players. It makes sense why they are still viewed as a potential top 25 team this upcoming season by some folks. And I think people also realize the significance of this season for the Gamecocks, in that this is a make or break year for Shane Beamer if he's going to be here for years to come moving forward, or if it's another bad season, he'll be on the chopping block. This is a huge year for South Carolina, and I think we've also seen the trend of they have a good year, then they have a bad year, then they have a good year, then they have a bad year. They had a bad year in 25. Could 26 mean they have a good year? Did I say that right? Yeah. Bad year in 25. Could they have a good year in 26?
Their best years are even number years. Even year Beamer is something to be worried about.
Which is ridiculous to even have to say, because at this point, you're 6 years into this tenure now. You should hope that there's some more consistency found, which it seemed like they did have consistency in the early years, where South Carolina overachieved in year one and won 7 games, and they won 8 games in 2022. But since then, it's been this roller coaster of bad year, then good year, then bad year. Hopefully this is a good year, but it needs to be more than that moving forward, of having a really good year and then making sure it becomes consistent moving forward.
I think a lot of this also has to do with Kendall Briles, right? And that's not the only staff change that you made, but that's the most significant one because of how much you struggled on offense a year ago. And I think Kendall Briles is a name that most of the college football public is at least familiar with. And yes, that does have to do with the fact that he's Art Briles' son, but I think people, the general public of college football, knows that Kendall Briles is thought of as a good, bright offensive mind. And when you have that coupled with a extremely talented quarterback that most people are going to look at and say, well, your offensive coordinator last year held you back with Mike Shula, I think there's excitement and hopefulness of what Kendall Briles can get out of Lenore Sellers, in addition to the other guys on offense. And they've done a good job of rebuilding a lot of areas in the offense, in the transfer portal, particularly the offensive line. But, when these kind of rankings come out, it has a lot to do with the bigger names, the Sellers, the Dylan Stewarts. In this case, we're talking about the offensive coordinator, too. I think that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Because, again, defense, we'll see. They were good enough last year. The offense just couldn't keep up with them. But I think having Sellers coming back, coupled with what people know is a good offensive coordinator, gives people reason like, hey, we saw what the Sellers guy was capable of at the end of the season 2 years ago. No reason why he can't get there or be better with Kendall Briles calling the plays now.
The big thing that this will ultimately come down to, I think, of what type of season South Carolina has is you have over 20-plus new transfers joining this team in 26. How many of them are going to be good? How many of them need to be good, I think, is the big question for this thing to work. Now, granted, a lot of them come on the offense and defensive line, so you're hoping you get a lot of production there, specifically on the offensive line. You're hoping all the changes you've made up front with Randy Clemens coming in as the new coach, you basically broke down the entire offensive line after 25 and rebuilt it back up. You're hoping that leads to something because it has to be. You have to give Lenoris more time in the pocket, and his decision-making has to be better. There has to be improvements across the board, not just with the new guys coming in, but the players returning. Lenoris has got to be better in 26 for this team to have a chance, and you're really hoping that is ultimately all these moves because look, Shane has made, I think, all the right moves this offseason. He's gone through everything. He's fired coaches. He's brought in new ones. He's signed his high school class, flipped players, had a really good transfer portal cycle. He's done everything good on paper this offseason. What is that going to amount to, though? Does it amount to just making a bowl game? In his hopes, it's probably getting to the playoff and winning a national championship. We'll see what that looks like, but he's definitely done the right things this offseason to potentially get this thing right, but still the pressure is going to be on him when September 5th rolls around.
So let's just say that these preseason rankings or expectations end up coming to fruition, and Carolina's somewhere around 23rd or 25th, which would probably mean they're about 8-4, and they play in like the Gator Bowl, right? Missouri played Virginia in the Gator Bowl this year, even though Missouri was unranked. If Carolina went 8-4 and played in the Gator Bowl, results of the game notwithstanding, is that successful? Do we consider that a successful season? Is that enough to keep the Beamer train rolling here?
I'm looking at the schedule. As of right now, you would potentially have 5 ranked teams on your schedule, like Bama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, A&M, and Georgia. I don't think it's unacceptable to go 8-4, but we have to consider this. When 2 of your wins are going to be against Kent State and Towson, break it down further. The next 10 games, you're going 6-4. I don't know. I think you got to go at least 9 wins next season.
Do you think 9 wins is the line?
I think it should be, right? It's one thing if Beamer didn't say outwardly that they will be in the playoff mix next year. Like he said it multiple times. That should be the goal for this team. And as we go back to the conversation we had a little bit earlier about Indiana setting the bar high for what can be done with little next to nothing and not having 5 stars everywhere. Newsflash, South Carolina has 5 stars in this team. They have a few of them, in fact, and some really talented players. This looks to be a pretty talented team heading into 26. I'm not saying they're going to go out here and go 12-0 in the regular season, but, man, I would really hope with the schedule they have, and you got to keep in mind, a lot of these schools have new head coaches. Kentucky, Florida's got a new coach. Arkansas's got a new coach. We don't know what those teams are going to be, but you're in your 6th year with Shane Beamer. You've got a really talented squad, you would hope. I would imagine this is at least an 8 or 9 win team, just looking at everything right now.
See, I don't view this necessarily as a playoff or bust season, and I get it. Shane Beamer put those own expectations on himself with what he said at the end of the year. But I think if this team went 8-4 and they ended up ranked 24th, again, bowl result notwithstanding at that point in time, there's no question in my mind he's back in 2027. I think that's more than enough to save his job. Now, if we get down to like 6 wins or
that's
7 wins, I think that's where we start to get into debate. But I think 8 wins, because, again, when you look at the schedule that you have, that means you're at least beating a couple of probably pretty decently ranked teams at some point during the season. Maybe you pull some big upsets. Who knows? But I think solidly, no matter what that combination is, I think 8 wins, especially if you're ranked in the top 25 at the end of the season, without question to me, says that Beamer's here for longer.
Yeah, I would agree with you. 8 to 9 wins should keep him safe for another year. But the thing is, man, when you bring up those playoff expectations, that's stuff that can easily just be used against you when you're talking about, okay, did South Carolina meet expectations in 25 or in 26? Well, no, they didn't, because the head coach is talking about needing to make the playoff and being in the playoff mix and all that. Well, if they win 8 to 9 games, maybe 9 games could get them into the mix, but like we saw 2 years ago. But 8 wins is not going to cut it. And again, I just go back to the schedule. They're going to win the first 2 games of the year. Heck, they should be 3-0 going into Alabama on September 26th. If they really were to kind of struggle a little bit the rest of the way, go 5-4 or whatever, I don't know. I think it just depends on who they beat is going to be the big thing here. Like, if they pull off some big upsets and win some big games and are ranked at the end of the year and they're going to the Citrus or the Gator Bowl, that's a pretty good year. But anything less than that is just not going to cut it, I don't think.
And we'll see if they embrace expectations or if they ignore them in the offseason, because Beamer teams seem to do their best when nobody's talking about them, right? When they come off of having a rough season, missing a bowl game, that's when they typically respond their best. So it's going to be interesting to see how much hype they get in the offseason and how they choose to address that, because, again, they seem to do better when they just kind of fly under the radar and can play the, well, nobody's giving us a chance card, because it does seem like right now people think you're going to be somewhat decent.
Yeah, I mean, they should hopefully have at the bare minimum. I don't know if decent's enough, honestly, but you're just hoping it's a good to great season for this team in 26, because God knows they need it.
Well, one program that won a championship is trying to retain its quarterback, and they're going to take him to court because of it. We'll discuss that coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. It's our Ed and Jack Feltry with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
I decided to take my talents. Nah, I'm just playing. Let's run this back.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. Howard Head and Jack Belcher with you on your Wednesday here on the game. It is time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. And I don't know if I'm putting this leak on Duke or if I'm putting this leak on Darian Mensah, who you just heard from there, because after Duke won the ACC, I know that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of everything that happened with the playoff, but Duke did win the ACC, didn't make the college ball playoff because their season as a whole was not great. Darian Mensah announced a couple weeks ago in a LeBron-esque decision type of video that he was coming back to the Blue Devils next year. They had already signed him to an agreement with NIL and all that kind of stuff, and, well, the leak started springing because he opted to try and transfer out. It seemed like the hot rumor was going to go to Miami for a hefty payday. Duke said not so fast. You got a contract with us that runs to the end of the year, and now they're taking him to court over it.
I have no problem with this. It's just like anything in the workforce, in any job. Like when you sign a contract, you're supposed to honor that contract, and when you don't, you typically have to pay a buyout of some sort. We see it in professional sports and everything. Like, we see it at these levels, and look, it's college athletics, but it's becoming more and more like pro sports at the end, with each passing day, as guys are now signing contracts and are being paid like the pros. And look, with Mensah, he signed a contract when he transferred to Duke, which runs through December 31st of this year. So he should be honoring that contract. And he made a whole LeBron-esque return video, like you said, Tyler, that he was back for another year, even though he was already under contract for 26. And a few days later decides to not honor that. That's a problem. And I think we are at a point where something has to be done, and you hope that Duke is able to win this case, because if not, I think it sets a bad precedent that the players have all the power. And look, the NCAA is a huge issue with all of this, but the fact that if the players are the ones with all the power in the end, that's going to set a real bad precedent for years to come, I think.
And unfortunately, this isn't the first example we've had of this offseason. Damon Williams, who had an agreement signed with Washington to come back for another year, attempted to enter the transfer portal, and they said, not so fast. You have an agreement set with us, and they were able to retain him at least up to this point in time. This all goes back to so many of the problems with college sports in general right now. We don't have collective bargaining. How enforceable are these contracts also comes up for debate. It's going to be interesting to see this legal process, play out. But right now, if I'm having a guess, I would think that, Darian Mensah is not going to be able to leave and go elsewhere. Again, the hot rumor was he was going to go to Miami to take over for the departing, Carson Beck. But it's like, all right, if you have to force somebody to return to your team, what's that dynamic like, right? Well, not only for like Manny Diaz, the coach, and Darian Mensah, but it's like with the guys in the locker room. Like, if you're going into a year with your star player, your signal caller, the quarterback of your team, knowing he didn't want to be on this team, how does this play out? Like, how does that dynamic go over in the locker room?
That's a good question. I think it sets a real bad look for Mensah if he. I just don't see how he wins this case, because I think all the evidence points to Duke being able to come out on top. Like, he signed a contract, and if you're not honoring that contract, that's a problem. And he made the whole return video, like we said. I just think, however this plays out, if he ultimately does have to come back to Duke for this upcoming season, that's going to be a real issue in the locker room, I think. And that's something that he's going to have to figure out with his teammates, and he's going to have to win them back over, because there's just no loyalty with a move like this. And there's not loyalty in college football to begin with guys transferring every which way. But it's a very bad look that you made a big deal about returning to Duke, and then you turn a blind eye a few weeks later and decide to just leave, try and leave for another school if there's a better opportunity out there. I mean, he was well connected to potentially going to Miami, but again, he's under contract at Duke, and you got to honor it.
Well, and this also creates an interesting secondary question of, okay, Now what does Miami do, right? Because it seemed that he was destined to end up in Miami, likely for a very big payday, obviously outbidding whatever Duke was expected to pay him to come back for 2026. Well, now that seems to be potentially off the table if Darian Mensah can't win this lawsuit. Emory Williams, the backup quarterback to Carson Beck, had already transferred out. Carson Beck is out of eligibility. Like, where do you go now? Now, again, because Miami played in the national championship, not that they weren't involved in the portal because these coaches are still doing portal stuff, but a lot of the high-level quarterbacks have been snatched up, right? So it's like, okay, and I don't doubt Miami's ability to outbid somebody. So do we see Miami go and poach somebody that's already on a roster, and that creates a whole nother thing? Like, because, again, if your expectation was Darian Mensah being your quarterback, now you got to go back to the drawing board. What do you do?
Yeah, it puts you in a position where I really don't know what you do at this stage because, and there's probably, here's the thing, there's still, with the way the portal works, I think it was over 10,000 guys have entered the portal at this point. There's still a lot of them that have not been signed. So there's going to be quarterbacks out there, but are they on the same talent level as Mensah? Probably not. So, you'll have options out there if this does not work in your favor and he's able to go to another school. But the thing is, let's say Mensah does win here and he is able to get out of his Duke contract. Where's he going to go, right? I mean, how long is this case going to take? Is it going to go into February? I mean, I'm not sure exactly just because we haven't seen too many cases like this in the NIL era, not that I know of, but I wonder how this plays out for either side because I think it's a tough situation for whichever side does end up losing in this case of if Duke doesn't get their quarterback back, well, now they got to go into the portal and go find a guy that's probably not as good as Mensah. But if Mensah wins, okay, well, what does he do? What school is he going to go to? Is Miami going to have a quarterback already signed on its roster to be their starter, or are they holding out for Mensah? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up because Duke, realistically, if this drags out long enough, Darian Mensah is not going to have options to go anywhere else. Like, he would almost at that point, whether he wins the lawsuit or not, be kind of forced to stay at Duke, I think, because if everybody else is snatched up quarterbacks, he doesn't have anywhere to go that's going to pay him what he wants. He may just kind of have to settle for staying at Duke.
Yeah, he might have to, and that's – look, I think he's got a good thing going at Duke, though. That's the thing. Duke won the ACC this year. They had a pretty good season, all things considered, and I get it. You want to go leave for a bigger, better position, get paid. I mean, did you see some of the details of that potential Miami offer? It was like $10 million. His sister gets put on scholarship and gets some NIL money, gets a car, home. Like, that'd be hard to turn down for sure. I'm sure Duke is not offering that level of compensation. Let's be honest. Miami's got more money than Duke in football. But you signed the contract, man. You put your pen to paper. You made a whole video about it. You got, like, if you lose this case, you're going back to Duke, and you have a lot of problems to deal with, meaning you got to win the team over, the coaching staff, everybody over, because there's going to be that obvious thing hanging over of, look at what happened. Like, you didn't want to be with us, so what does that mean now moving forward?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this play out and, again, what that dynamic is if he is indeed forced to stay. But this continues to go down the path of, do we ever get to a place where colleges, the athletes, and, everybody can collectively bargain to where these contracts are more, I don't want to say ironclad, where these kind of things won't happen, right? When you sign on the dotted line, you know exactly what you're locked in for. There's no debate on if you can leave or not unless the school releases you from that contract, because we're seeing too many things end up in court. And that's the not fun part of college football now, is that everything ends in litigation. If we could just get to the point where everybody can agree to a set of rules and guidelines in place, wouldn't have this anymore. But I'm not holding my breath on that happening anytime soon.
Now, is that ever going to happen? Probably not.
Probably not.
If somebody doesn't get their way, well, go to court over it, sue the NCAA, sue the school, whoever. There probably are going to be repercussions because of this. One where it's a bad look for Mensah if he wins this case. It sets a real bad precedent in that way, that the players have a lot more power than we already think. And if he does have to go back to Duke, well, he's going to have to deal with everything that comes, all the backlash of going back to the school that you were all intended on leaving and breaching your contract over.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But again, that lawsuit handed down yesterday with Duke suing Darian Mensah. We'll keep an eye on that as the next couple of weeks go by. It's Wednesday, which means Would You Rather, a little bit of a different Would You Rather Wednesday coming up next as we discuss championships and what it means to certain states. That's up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri on your Wednesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Not halftime show. Look at me, Jack. I said I was going to mess up the day, messed up the name of the show. It's the Extra Point. It is Wednesday. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher wrapping up hour number 2. It is a Would You Rather Wednesday. A little different one this time. I'm not going to take credit for this because I did come across it on Twitter, but I felt it was an interesting question to ask. And the question is kind of 2 questions. First one is, do you think the average Indiana sports fan, like a person living in the state of Indiana that's just your average sports fan in the Hoosier State, do you think they would trade Indiana's national championship on Monday for the Pacers winning the NBA Finals last year?
It's a great question. I mean, basketball is...
It's maybe the biggest state for it.
Yeah, like it's rooted in Indiana. Considering the way that finals went down, playing OKC, going to Game 7, Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt. That really ended the Pacers' chances. Winning a national championship in football is a really big deal. But I think considering it in the state of Indiana, I would say an NBA Finals championship is bigger.
I think I'm going to side with you on that one. I went back and forth on this because the Hoosier thing is such an incredible story, right? And it captivated the entire world of college football and sports in general. But like I'm thinking about the average Indiana sports fan, right? And I get it. You know, IU has the largest living alumni base out of all schools. I don't know if all those people still live in Indiana. And there's obviously other, college football fandoms in there with, Notre Dame, Purdue, just within the state itself. And I remember back to the finals or just the playoff run for the Pacers last year, kind of swept the nation a little bit. Like Pacers fever was a real thing. They had all those crazy last-minute wins, Halliburton doing what he did. I think the average Indiana sports fan might pick the NBA Finals over the national championship.
Because there's history with basketball. With football, Indiana got good in 2024. It's not like they've been coming up short of national championships for years now and have been always in the hunt. Like, this is brand new territory for them that I'm sure they're still those fans are probably still trying to process what that feeling is really even like, because it's something they've never seen before. With basketball, look, with not just the Indiana Hoosiers, but with the Pacers. I mean, the Pacers have had some really good teams over the years. They've fallen short in the finals during the Reggie Miller years and with Paul George and dealing with the Miami Heat in the early 2010s and getting back to the finals last season and coming up short when your star player gets hurt. That's a gut punch for sure. And I'm sure Pacers fans and just Indiana folk in general would have loved to see their team win an NBA Finals.
On the flip side of that, let's go to the side that did win the NBA Finals last year, OKC. Do you think the average Oklahoma sports fan would trade the NBA Finals for the Sooners winning the national championship this year?
No, I'm going to stick with the same exact answer I gave for Indiana. I think if you're an Oklahoma, I don't know, what are they called? Oklahomans?
Oklahomites.
Whatever. The people of Oklahoma, if those are your two, like if Oklahoma is your college team and OKC Thunder are your NBA team, again, another situation here like the Pacers where before 2025, the Thunder had not won anything. I don't count the Supersonics winning the title back in '78 or whatever year it was. For the Thunder, they've been through some tough years for sure. Like Kevin Durant leaving for the Warriors was a gut punch back in 2016, I can imagine. And going through the rebuild and getting all those draft picks and going through some real bad years to become what they are now, I think you would take that any day. Because Oklahoma's won national championships before, right?
They have.
Like, yeah, maybe it's a little different now that they're in the SEC, but I think you take the Thunder winning the NBA Finals for the first time in their franchise history over another Oklahoma national championship, even though Oklahoma hasn't won one in like a quarter of a century.
See, I think the average Oklahoma fan would take the national championship, because I think it means just college football being ingrained that much more in the state. And that's not saying that Indiana's not enjoying their national championship, because they absolutely are. But like, I think the average person would rather see their college team be successful than their pro team. And again, OKC is the only pro team in the state of Oklahoma, so you don't have options to pick from like the Colts or the Pacers or whatever. But I think the average Oklahoma fan or average Oklahoma sports fan is probably picking the Sooners national championship over the NBA Finals.
It could go either way, I think. You just look at that, the crowds that they have at, I don't know what they call the arena now. I know it was Chesapeake Arena at one point, but you know what they have there with OKC and that fan base. I don't know. I think it could really go either way. There's no wrong answer, I think, but definitely for Indiana, I think the Pacers winning the finals would outweigh Indiana football, who just got good, winning a national championship. But for Oklahoma, I think it could definitely go either way.
Well, there's your debate for Would You Rather Wednesday. Coming up next, we'll get back into what's going on in the transfer portal with South Carolina as we get into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday on the Game.
If you're out there looking for a local, reliable HVAC service for your home or your business in the Midlands, reach out to our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, KrantzCooling.com, Krantz, cooling with a K, KrantzCooling.com, or give Justin Krantz, the general manager over there, and his team a call, 803-755-0793. I've had Krantz Cooling out to my home several times. They did a mini split for me in the garage. They've checked out all the other units at my house to make sure they're running in tip-top shape. Love my experience so much that when my mom moved to Irmo, I got them to go out to her home too. They put in 2 mini splits for her. They handle all her HVAC needs as well. They could do the same for you. KrantzCooling.com or 803-755-0793. Since 1983, Krantz Cooling, their team has been providing great service to business owners and families in the Midlands. They can do the same for you.
11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, Towerhead West Mitchell, and the 2025 Buy or Sell Champion, Chris Clark, along with us. Chris, did you find a place for your certificate yesterday? Have you framed it over the mantle? Where's it at?
Haven't decided what to do with it yet. It is sitting on the desk at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't know if we're doing a lamination, a framing. Not sure, but it is prized.
Okay.
Yes.
Good to know.
You. Yes. Great design skills, too, by the way.
Thank you. I worked hard on that. Appreciate Canva and their
not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor, but their free ability to make certificates on the fly.
Yes, it does make it easy. People like us.
Wes, are you jealous now seeing what he got to be more motivated to win next year?
I was jealous before that, so yeah, I'm even more jealous now. But yeah, shout out to Canva for making graphic designers out of all of us since, when did they start? 2013. We'll just go with it.
Sure, why not?
Serving the community for...
Has it only been that long?
We have no idea.
I don't know.
That's 13 years, dude. I feel like Canva's not that old of a...
It's absolutely crazy. Like my kid, you know, first of all, kids get computers now.
Yes.
You know? Like our kids bring home computers from school. And one day I'm like looking at what one of my daughters did. I'm like, are you on Canva? Yeah. I'm like, y'all have that? They just have like a subscription to Canva for the school. They can all go on there.
Yeah,
my kids know more about Canva than I do.
I don't think I touched that until high school. Or not,
I didn't
college.
touch it at all until I was very far into adulthood.
Oh, hey, it makes everything easier,
Yeah,
including,
it does.
certificates for buy or sell, which Chris won this year with the final score of 67, which I'm sure the kids loved when you showed them that.
One of them, yeah, they did.
Anyways, we ended yesterday's show. We didn't get a chance to dive too deep into it because it ran out of time, but talking about who intrigues us most out of the transfer portal so far that South Carolina's got, Wes brought this question up. We named our guys yesterday. You can get a chance to really expand on it. But, Chris, you went with Caleb Herring, the edge rusher from Tennessee. Wes, you went with the other Christian Clark from Texas, the running back. And I went with Jabri Wallace-Coleman, the transfer running back from Penn State. Chris, you want to explain your reasoning for why you went with Caleb Herring?
Well, number one, priority position out of the portal. So if you're looking at the general overview of the portal takes, I mean, there's a bunch of them. What's the number, Wes, you and I were talking about yesterday? I don't have it in front of me. It's like 20 kids, right? Give or take.
Total around 25 now,
25
right?
Additions, 25.
Yeah, 25 kids out of the portal. And so, look, there's levels to all of them. Not all of them are going to be starters. Some are going to be depth piece. Some is kind of a wait and see. A lot of, running back, for instance, a lot of competition there. And Caleb Herring, look, he's going to be coming in. He's going to have to earn his spot like anyone else. But you knew coming into this portal cycle that the Gamecocks were going to have the goal of signing a guy that would have starter potential or has started in the past opposite Dylan Stewart. And for a while you've got Jalen Brown, got Des Umeazulu, got George Wilson. Two of those guys are out of the equation now, right? So the necessity of having a guy who can come in and play immediately is heightened even more now, I think, and would have been even with those guys on the roster, but now even more so. And then you look at Caleb Herring. This is a guy that, checks a lot of the boxes of a guy that could end up being, having his most productive year at South Carolina in his last go-round in college. He's a former highly rated guy, signed with Tennessee out of high school, had a nice offer list. He was the number one prospect in the state of Tennessee coming out of high school. And then he's shown some flashes. I don't think he is what he could be yet. The consistency, the production hasn't quite been there. But look at him last year, had 4 sacks, had a couple sacks against Georgia, had a couple sacks against Mississippi State. From a size standpoint, he passes the eyeball test. And then physically, if you go back and watch him, you see some clips of him, you're like, man, this guy's got a really good first step. He can move. He's big enough to hold up. And so I think, the dream scenario is for this guy to come in and do, not necessarily win the Nagurski, right? But just come in and be like a Kyle Kennard. And that Kyle Kennard, good player at Georgia Tech. Mm-hmm. I think he had 7 sacks the year before he got to South Carolina, had 4 in a game against Wake Forest. He came in and really elevated his game in his final year. And so when I look at Herring, I see a guy that still has potential, but has played in the SEC at Tennessee against high-level competition, has produced in spots, and then plays a need position to where you look at it on paper, he's going to play a lot of snaps this year. So that's why he's my most intriguing.
And I think the fact that he's come from Tennessee, again in the SEC, and has put up productive numbers this past year. What was a very talented edge room. He wasn't the feature guy in there. They had a lot of good talent, but he found his way on the field and made plays when he had the opportunity to. I think out of this long list of guys in the portal, he's one that I think you have one of the better ideas of what he is as a player, right? Like there's some of these guys that come in that haven't played a lot, some of these guys that had production at lower levels or different levels of football. You say, okay, how can that translate? Caleb Herring, you have a good idea of what he can do against the exact type of competition that he's going to be seeing every single week here in the SEC.
Yeah, South Carolina definitely likes his ability and production at the SEC level. Now, you hope you can take that to another sort of production level at South Carolina, and he's going to have the opportunity to do that. To me, his role so far has kind of been a bit like what Brian Thomas Jr.'s was for South Carolina for so many years, and then we saw BT step into that starting role opposite of Dylan and really have a good year for South Carolina. So the hope is that this kid can come in. You're getting a bigger opportunity now. Like obviously you have to earn these jobs, and I think there's a difference between saying a guy is a projected starter in January, and then obviously they got to actually go do it. But in January, if you were trying to project kind of what was this guy added to the roster to do, he was projected, he was added to come in and start opposite of Dylan. Like that's just, now he's got to go do it, but that was the thought process, that was the hope is, hey, come in. Frankly, in today's college football world, that's what he's being paid to do. You know what I'm saying? Like he's being paid to come in and earn that spot. And I think we've seen that edge position is one where you do see guys as their careers go on. Like there is a path of being kind of that, I played, but I wasn't a starter for a good portion of my career. Now I'm getting that opportunity in the latter part of my career, and I'm going to get to go play. And as we've seen, Clayton White will turn these guys loose. Like obviously you're going to have a different edge coach than you would have had. We saw Sterling Lucas do a great job with some of these guys in the latter parts of their career. So Deion Barnes, yeah, it's a different guy. You can't say, hey, come in and work with Sterling Lucas. However, Clayton White, willing to be aggressive up front, willing to let his guys, some defenses are more along the lines of, hey, our defensive linemen are going to eat up space. They're not necessarily going to be attacking upfield. We have seen they are willing to let their guys attack upfield. And I think there's a big premium on athleticism at that position for South Carolina. And, if you're Caleb Herring, you have a top, 2 or 3 pass rusher in the country opposite of you that's going to be taking up attention on every single snap. So I think that is an excellent situation for Herring coming into, knowing that you're getting, A, bigger opportunity for snaps, but B, you're going to have a dude on the other side.
Does part of the intrigue for you picking this guy, Chris, come from, as you mentioned a moment ago, also having the new edge coach come in with Deion Barnes now that Sterling Lucas has left? Because you have a guy in Deion Barnes that has given you or shown you the ability to coach at a high level at Penn State with a lot of really good edge rushers up there. Abdul Carter, one of the most recent ones, coming out in last year's draft, paired with a guy in Caleb Herring that is produced at an SEC level where, you're kind of like, okay, I'm interested to see what these two guys can do together and what kind of potential development Deion Barnes can give him in both of their first years at Carolina.
That is part of it. But that kind of extends to the whole room. I think just Deion Barnes, you look at his resume, it's shorter for sure at the college level. It's been at one school, his alma mater at Penn State, where he worked himself up from player, NFL player, grad assistant, and then gets the on-field job. And so, sure, that is part of it. I think the other things probably weigh into it for me a little bit more, but I'm intrigued just in general by Deion Barnes and, what he's going to do with that room. I think also you look at Herring, if you look at what he did last season, it was his most productive college season at Tennessee. But when you peel back the layers a little bit, Tennessee wasn't that good defensively last year, and they made a change at coordinator, right? Went and hired Jim Knowles. And so, if you kind of look at it, okay, Tennessee, their cupboard certainly was not bare defensively, but putting Caleb Herring with another year of experience, with a new coach, in a new scheme and system that may arguably be able to accentuate his talents and draw that out a little bit more, and I don't know if that'll happen, but it could on paper, in theory, then that's just another reason. So, yeah, I mean, I think with Barnes, he's part of it. He's part of that equation because how much of that potential that's still untapped can he draw out? But you could say that for George Wilson, who we haven't seen play here yet, or you could even extend that to Dylan Stewart and what's probably going to be his last year. What kind of final step can he take in his development?
Talk about players that intrigue us out of the transfer portal so far. We'll take a look at the running back room coming up next for a couple more. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. We're discussing guys that intrigue us maybe the most out of what Carolina's added so far in the transfer portal. Chris chose Caleb Herring, the edge rusher out of Tennessee, which we discussed in the first segment. Wes and I both choosing running backs as ours, and I'll start off with mine because I just don't think we're going to be able to spend as much time on it because he's not done anything yet at the college level. But I went with Jabri Wallace-Coleman from Penn State, transferred over here, of course, following Stan Drayton, who was the Penn State running back coach, and, of course, didn't play this past year, but that was a very talented running back room. I know Penn State didn't have the year they wanted, but Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen were one of the better pairings of running backs going in to the college football season. Were a big part of why that team was in the college football playoff the year before. So there's no shame in not seeing the field because those two guys are toting the rock, more often than not there. But I look at him as somebody with a lot of very high upside. And I go back to the comments that Stan Drayton's made about him and what he believes in his abilities. Again, this was a kid that was recruited by a lot of the high-level programs in Georgia and West Virginia, and I've seen it up at Penn State coming out of high school. And if he was coming into a running back room that already had an established 1,000-yard rusher, one of these other guys that got out of the portal was the definite RB1, then maybe I wouldn't look at this with so much intrigue. But considering the fact that this room is so wide open, we got an idea of what we have with Fuller, with Jordan Howell, guys like that have been here for a couple of years, but nobody has truly taken the reins of running back yet. So it's as wide open as ever. And again, we don't have any college production to fall back on, but it wouldn't surprise me. This guy came in here, especially given the reputation he already has with the new running backs coach, and really turned a lot of heads and surprised a lot of people this year.
Yeah, I'm actually with you, Tyler. I said Christian Clark, but there is part of me that I'm like, let's not forget about this kid, because I think one factor for me is, okay, nobody else had the look at him that Stan Drayton did. Like, I think one of the hardest things to do in college football right now is making a decision on that kid that you recruited in high school, who was a highly recruited guy. You miss on him, he goes somewhere else, is there for a year, maybe two, doesn't really play, and then enters the portal and says, hey, coach, you still interested? And you don't have that firsthand evaluation of, all right, is this guy kind of on his way to being a miss? Or what are the other circumstances about why they haven't played? And so, I think sometimes schools can hurt themselves by just basing, hey, we're going to take this guy because he was highly recruited out of high school. Other times, you might miss on a guy because the production hasn't been there. You say, we're not going to go on this guy, and there's just a reason why it hadn't worked yet. If you are Stan Drayton, you have had a firsthand look every single day at Jabri Wallace-Coleman in your program. So to me, that means something. I was sitting there going, when we found out they were going to take him and probably get him, I was going, okay, it seems like an okay pickup. Then I flipped on the film from high school, and my ears perked up, and I was like, wow. This, if we were watching this high school film and saying South Carolina got this guy, we would be hyping him up quite a bit. So I picked Christian Coleman. I'll tell you why in a second. But I'm also, not going to be shocked at all if we start getting into spring ball and start hearing some reports, and Tyler's guy ends up being one they talk about a lot as well. I don't think it's a given which running back we're going to be hearing about. I think there's going to be a very nice battle for what really are the most important spots for running backs, I think, are number 1 and number 2. Those are the guys that are going to play a lot.
Well, and it's also it's hard to do this nowadays because of the year-to-year nature of college football rosters, but he's also a bonus potentially. You have to say potentially, right? You got to keep everybody on your roster from a retention standpoint year after year, but you look at him, this isn't a senior. Right. This is a guy who's got a full 4-year slate of eligibility, redshirted last year at Penn State. And so you can keep him into the future. Maybe he does something. Maybe he does a lot this year. Maybe he's one of the best guys this year. That'd be great. But if not, maybe he can play some type of role, continue to develop, and then you've got him for for longer. But, yeah, I mean, Drayton does really like this guy. I actually pulled up I don't have the audio, but I pulled up a quote from before the 2025 season that Stan Drayton had about Coleman, and he called him special. Now, he said two things. He's green, meaning inexperienced, and at that time, he was 213 pounds. So their big thing was, let's get him a little bit bigger, let's get him a little bit stronger. He didn't feel like he was quite strong enough to play a lot at the Big Ten level, but he said he's a very natural runner, unbelievable vision, loose in his hips. I'm excited about Jabri Coleman. So, take it for what it's worth. Coaches generally are going to say good things about their guys publicly. That kind of went above and beyond. And then to your point, Wes, this is a guy that Drayton spent an entire season with. And then when it came time for portaling, he's like, that's that. We need this guy. It could have gone the other direction and said, had him, recruited him, not what we need. We can do better. He gave that stamp of approval, and I think that means something.
And was playing behind or not playing behind. Actually, we kind of all have guys we get attached to out of the recruiting process. Both those guys for Penn State. But I still remember when Dez was here as the running backs coach and was recruiting Nick Singleton very, very early in the process. And it was, he's got some ties to South Carolina, the state of South Carolina. There's some family here. Feel pretty good about this, and I was like, man, this guy is a stud. Obviously, he went on to – both those guys were fantastic at Penn State. So you throw on that film, though, very, very first clip. It's a long run. Like, I don't think he's a home run guy in college. In high school he was, but – just the literal like power, the contact balance, the ability to run through tackles and keep moving the pile. I mean, this kid is a physical runner, or at least was in high school. So does that kind of project forward to the college level? I think will be the thing with him, because if it does, you may have a steal on your hands here at the running back position.
So we'll stick in the running back room, and again, Wes is going to go with Christian Clark, who we do have a little bit more of an idea of what he can do at the college level. Second leading running back at Texas this past year, also in a very talented running back room with Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter. Comes over here after his freshman year, ran for 100 yards in his last game, against Michigan in the Citrus Bowl. And again, I think you've used this as an opportunity where you don't have an established back in this room already. Like, hey, I can come in here and maybe be the guy. Still got to go out there and earn it. And it's a very full room now with 6 scholarship guys, but one that I think from the ability of coming over from Texas and having some production already gets a lot of people excited for what he can do here.
Well, I think the thing with Christian also for me is that, all right, as soon as he hit the portal, South Carolina said, hey, that's our guy we want to go get. And they already had 2 guys committed. There was a time when we didn't really know if there were going to be many resources at all spent in the running back room via the portal. And we ended up taking 3 guys. Well, I think they were okay just taking 2. And because they liked Clark enough, they said, let's add this guy as well. And so that speaks to me, the fact that I think he would have been playing and making an impact already for Texas, if not for an early career injury. He was obviously behind some other guys as well. And then you get to see him. I got to wonder what that bowl game experience where he goes for 105, goes for a touchdown, was the feature back for Texas against Michigan, what that meant for him in terms of showing what he is capable of. Now, Texas, to be fair, they did say, hey, we're going to go out and try to add some true already productive RB1s, spend some money at this position. And on the same time, you hear, hey, they wanted Clark back. But he looks and says, well, they're going to the portal trying to recruit over me, essentially. Let me see what my options are out there. There was talk, at least among the Texas media folks, of, hey, we think this guy can play. We think this guy can be a major contributor in the future at Texas. And so now he'll get that chance at South Carolina. You certainly would say on paper, among the portal running back additions for South Carolina, he is the one that is most likely, like, potentially to be an RB1. But again, I don't think that's a given yet at this point.
Yeah, and we'll certainly have to see. Again, these are the names that intrigue us so far out of the transfer portal. And again, still a couple more scholarships left for South Carolina to fill out as the next couple of days go by. And we'll stay on top of that as those spots do get filled. But Carolina is showing up in some very early top 25s. What does that mean, and what are expectations going to be for this team as the offseason rolls along? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Tomorrow night, very busy night here on the game, and our sister station B106 is women's basketball takes on Oklahoma on the road. Tip-off at 7:30. Pregame coverage starting at 7 on our sister station B106.7. And Carolina Calls with men's basketball coach Lamont Paris at 7 o'clock right here on 107.5 The Game. Men's basketball picking up the victory last night over Oklahoma themselves over at Colonial Life Arena to get themselves to 2-4 in conference play. Of course, the college football season just ended, quite literally not even 48 hours ago. Do you guys know how many days until we get college football back in 2026?
It's 220 something, isn't it?
It's too many.
Dead on 220. Week 0 is exactly in 220 days. I know Wes won't be watching.
Oh, all right. Wait.
Week
So
0.
it's 227 days.
227 until we get a full slate of
until
week 1
real
games.
football.
Until Wes starts caring. For the others of us, 220 days.
Do we have any confirmed week 0 contests?
That's actually a good question.
We
not sure.
need to look
I'm sure
and
we
see.
do. The games that Wes won't care about.
Yeah.
Let's see. Week 0 this year, Hawaii at Stanford, just like this past year.
Wow.
I feel like that's
guys.
That's always.
North Carolina and TCU in Dublin. So I guess we're going to play a game in Dublin every single year. NC State and Virginia in Rio de Janeiro.
What?
New Mexico State at Florida State, and Memphis and UNLV. That could actually be a pretty fun game, actually.
If the
There's some
game,
decent ones
if
in there.
you're having to push Memphis and UNLV as your game,
Listen, those
then
are
I rest
What do you
my
have
case.
against Dan Mullen?
those are two quality G5 programs. That could be a fun game.
Could be a fun game.
I'll
Yeah,
watch
cool.
I'll watch the game in Brazil for pure,
Purely, why are we playing this here?
yeah, like
Questions?
Just I'm very interested in that, and I mean, the teams maybe near college football playoff team Virginia.
Yeah, they really wet the bed on that one.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one for a while for them.
Yeah. By the way, we brought this up. Duke is actively suing Darian Mensah to get him to return because that's just what we do now.
I don't blame them though.
No, I mean, he signed a contract.
Isn't that
But-
kind of like the awkwardness level on that is beyond, in the pros, you get guys that hold out. I'm not coming to training camp until we, and it's kind of like understood. Like, I don't think any side like takes it personally.
It's business. You're
business.
negotiating what that player feels they're
Holding
owed.
out, and a lot of times it gets worked out. You go play, fine, business, like you said. This level, it feels a little bit different. It's like, all right, let's say I have no clue how it's going to play out. Although, I will say, a temporary restraining order was granted today, or whatever the legal terminology, I'm botching it, allowing an Alabama basketball player, a former Alabama basketball player, who signed NBA contracts and spent time with like 3 different G League teams, is now going to be eligible for Bama again, like now.
Yeah.
Unless something else happens. So I don't know if that'll have, it's a different situation, but just to let you know, like some of the things that are being done in the courts right now, let's say Darian Mensah has to go back to Duke. I mean, what's that dynamic going to be like between him? Like, is he going to mail it in? Is he going to play hard? Like, what's the dynamic? Some fans will be mad. I mean, will fans be mad? Will they be happy when he scores a touchdown? Like, it's just fascinating.
It was going to be like in the locker room, like, oh, I know you didn't want to be here, but you're forced to be here. How do we?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be our leader. You're the quarterback. Like,
Sure.
How do we?
Not just a random dude.
Yeah. How do we deal with that?
I don't think he can mail it in because he does still have an NFL future to.
Yes. That was too strong.
Hope towards. I mean, Damon Williams at Washington though, similar.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to have. Here's the thing, man.
My bad, guys.
Like, hey, these guys are pretty understanding about stuff, man. Like you see when a kid transfers out, their teammates like share the post and like the post and good luck, dude. Like, I mean, the kids don't really take it personal. Now, I don't know, man. Like, just kind of exiting the very last second. Because here's the thing: if he were to say, "All right, coach, I gotta go. This is what's best for me," and it was at the beginning of the portal window, like, yeah, you're gonna fight it, but you're gonna be like, all right, let's take that money we were giving to him and let's go find another quarterback in the background. Well, when it happens at the very, very end, you really just don't have that opportunity to do that, which I think is what really, really sucks for Duke. Now, I do wonder how much of this was going on behind the scenes before it, like, actually got to this point. Like, we know, I mean, pretty obvious, allegedly Miami, that was even in, so did y'all see it's in the court records now. There's a tweet that supposedly knew the details of the Miami offer before Mensah even told the staff he was leaving.
Yep.
And that tweet made it into the court records. And, Duke, as far as I know, I was reading on this earlier, they didn't even name Miami, which the breakdown I was reading said it was very, very smart lawyering, because you don't necessarily have evidence 100% that can hold up in a court of law, even though you know what happened, that Miami did this. But you do have evidence that somebody on the internet claimed to know the exact offer from Miami. And you do know, like, literally they broke it down. This is when that went out. This is when he talked to the staff. This is when he entered the portal. And so you're not saying, hey, Miami did this. You're saying, I'm going to let the rest of you connect the dots here. And so I think just the approach on all these things are very interesting. Apparently, the initial judge on this thing is a Duke men's basketball season ticket holder. So
Well, that's why they sued him in their own county, because they knew they're going to get
But no, he has now recused himself. Although he did grant, Chris, you're going to have to do the legalese for me. He basically granted Mensah the ability to enter the portal, right?
The injunction.
Yeah, but then at this point, Mensah can't enroll anywhere else yet, I think.
Basically, he's in the portal, so if he wins, then boom, he's already there and can go elsewhere. But if he loses, then he just has to remove himself, I guess.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because a lot of, and I mean, if you think about this from a technical standpoint, even for us in here, non-lawyers, obviously, a lot of the arguments, if you look at some of the NIL expert attorneys online, Darren Heitner, Mitt Winter, their argument is the portal is like, and others have pointed this out too, the portal is really kind of just a mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's a tool, an administrative tool. We all sit around and say, well, kids have to enter the portal, it starts this day and it ends this day. Technically, what prevents a kid from just saying, actually, I'm just going to de-enroll and I'm going to go enroll at another school? And from a legal standpoint, we don't have to like it, right? But that is a sound argument. And that's one of the reasons we haven't been able to get a hold on all this, and aside from not having a structure, is, we basically have a professionalized version of college athletics where we still have things like enrolling at a school, taking classes, things of that nature that are part of it. If this was just a pro league, there'd be a lot more structure. But what is to stop a kid legally from saying, I'm just going to go enroll at that school? Now, you've got contractual things like apparently Duke has Mensah's NIL rights exclusively. So, hey, if you end up enrolling at Miami or whatever school, pick your school, fine. We have your NIL rights, and so from that standpoint, you signed a contract. What does the court say about the contract? So there's so many different moving parts to all this thing. And, stuff like this, stuff like the Alabama basketball kid, Shannon Terry, who founded On3, had a great tweet. He's had some bangers lately, but he said these types of things, and he was talking about the Alabama basketball kid being eligible who's a G League player right now. They're good and bad for college sports. They're bad in that you have pros apparently coming back to play in college, but good in that some of the things that are happening are so, like, couldn't have seen that coming, so ridiculous that maybe this finally gets us closer to having some type of structure in college sports as these things continue to happen. And finally people say, all right, we have got to fix this and create a structure.
Oh, we can only hope. We'll see.
We'll see. We're still a long way away, I feel like. But I didn't even know, and I guess we're seeing maybe you can't. I didn't even know you could get away with a 2-year deal. Like I know you can propose it.
Yep.
And you can want to do a 2 or 3 year deal for a player, but it doesn't really seem that they hold up very. Even this one that appeared to be pretty ironclad is going to get pushed to the absolute brink and may not hold up. Like even when you're trying to be like, hey, we're willing to do this 2-year deal here, which, by the way, here's the other reason you feel bad for Duke. Mensah was already a good player, but they were willing to say, we're giving you this 2-year deal. You're able to lock up that financial freedom for 2 seasons. You know what I'm saying? What if he got to Duke and didn't play well? What if he got to Duke and got hurt? Like, what if he got to Duke and it just didn't work out? Duke was willing to say, hey, we're giving you this massive deal for 2 full guaranteed seasons. And yes, he went out and played well and probably lived up to the deal. But the entire, like, Duke took the risk of being willing to give him the 2 years and now is going to get basically, on the other side of it, I don't want to say the word, but it's not good for them.
Yeah, it's not. We'll see how it plays out. We'll come back, wrap up the hour, see where Carolina falls in some preseason top 20 or way too early top 25s here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris wrapping up the hour here on your Wednesday on the game. Again, it's a long way until we get college football back coming up at the end of August and beginning of September. But it's not stopping people from putting out their way too early top 25s. And maybe the surprise of some, Carolina is showing up in a lot of these. Brandon Marcello of CBS, Nick Bromberg, Brad Crawford, just to name a few that have already put out theirs and have Carolina kind of on the fringe, 22nd, 24th, 25th, in that range. And again, what do these rankings mean? Nothing. And, once we get into the preseason AP poll, that'll be more of a talking point. And obviously the college football playoff ranking is the one that matters at the end of the day. But I do think it's intriguing that for a team that just came off of a 4-8 season, people are already, from a national standpoint, looking at it and saying, okay, I see that team making a significant enough leap to where I think they should be in the top 25 before the season starts.
Yeah, I think that, for one, there's maybe this sense for South Carolina of, okay, maybe the hype train was just a year early. And, I think a lot of it goes back to what did Lenore Sellers' output look like last year compared to what we expected? What did the offense as a whole look like? And what does the change at OC and O-line coach and a complete just rebuild on the O-line do for that side of the ball, combined with a defense that should be, equally good, if not better, this year? And, I do think there were some important losses on the defensive side of the ball you're going to have to replace, but you also bring back a bunch of guys, and you're going to have a true, I feel like a little bit of a true old-school college defense in that you actually have some guys that have played here, stuck around, have reps within the system. Many of them, I'm trying to go through them in my head right now, you probably have as many actual high school guys on this defense that have been in the system for a while as probably about anybody at the Power 4 level in the country, to be honest. And so I think there's a path where you're saying this South Carolina team next year could be pretty good. Also, the Gamecocks tend to kind of go in it's almost like a yo-yo, like it's up and down, and it's kind of when we kind of build out these very high expectations, we ignore the potential limitations. And then when there's a down year and you go into next year and you're flying under the radar just a little bit, that's when South Carolina tends to perform well. So I don't know what happens if the national media starts to pick up on that trend and then starts to give South Carolina hype before the year, like which one counteracts the other, I don't know. But this is going to be a very talented, very veteran-laden roster. It's just a matter of what can you do with it this year compared to last year.
Yeah, it is fascinating that they're getting some, preseason love. And I thought last year, guys, some of the projections, what was South Carolina, 11, 13, something like that preseason?
13 in the preseason poll. Got up to 10.
That, to me, was too high. Now, that is not me, especially with the benefit of hindsight. I thought South Carolina was going 4-8. No, I did not think that whatsoever. I thought that those top 15, top 13 type rankings were, given what South Carolina had lost, some of the questions that they had, too much, too many questions. This time around, they do have the foundation, and I think people are looking at it saying they've made some changes, they've got some pieces, let's see.
Yeah, we'll certainly have to see. And again, at the end of the day, these projections don't mean anything. It's more of a talking point than anything else, but intriguing nonetheless that enough people are looking at quite frankly, a lot of the things that Carolina's done since the season ended when it came to changing out your coaching staff, when it came to addressing areas of need in the portal. And again, we're going to have an entire 9 months to continue talking about this, but I'd say I can't disagree with saying Carolina's done a lot of the right things that would give you optimism for what 26 can be compared to 25.
Yeah, and again, how different is last season if you just have a better performance at OC and you just get what we expect out of Lenore Sellers and leave everything else the same? I don't think you're going to the playoff, but I think you have a much better season than what happened. And I do think there was kind of a point preseason where if you were looking at that top 25, and once you got past the top 5 to 8 teams, there was already so much uncertainty with the portal about what these teams even were. I think a lot of people just started going, all right, which of these teams do I know players on? Do I know they have some big names at? Do I know that they return players at? And you're going, okay, South Carolina, they get Lenore Sellers back. They get Dylan Stewart back. Hey, why not? I'll throw them in there at 15 because there was just a lot of uncertainty past that top 8 or so teams. And that's part of the reason why I think they ended up at the position they were preseason last year.
That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, halftime show, myself and Bill Gunner, Gamecock baseball assistant coach Monty Lee joining us to start the show here in a couple minutes on your Wednesday here on the game.
Integrated? Here you go. I can try. You want to get it? Yeah. Bye, boys. It's gone. All right, folks, before we get out of here, let me tell you about our friends at Integrated Media at 803-948-8327 or integratedmediainc.com where you can get more information about their great services. They've been to my house. They've been to Chris's. They haven't been to Tyler's yet, but we're going to send them over there soon. And we need to send them to your house where they can upgrade anything having to do with the tech in your home. I feel very comfortable saying that. These guys pretty much know everything there is to know about home tech. So if you've got this thought you've been dreaming up, just throw it at them. I promise you they'll figure out a way to make it a reality. That could be TV installations. That could be going all in on the man cave, turn the basement into a home theater system. Or if you want that peace of mind where you upgrade your security and cameras around your home and then integrate it all into a tablet setup, they can do that as well. 803-948-8327 or integratedmediainc.com today.